The Kick-Tastrophe Nightmare happened this weekend,
The Ravens conjured a Monday night miracle.
and Jon Gruden has left the building.
Welcome to Saturday Morning Inspection. Nick, before we start, quick question. What time is the wedding again? Am I underdressed? Am I missing something? Or do I have some time?
You got a little bit of time, but for me, it's my wedding week, so it's kind of my big game week. So you got to get in the right mindset early. It's all about practice, getting the reps in before the big day on Sunday. So just like those guys in the NFL, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm getting my practice in, got my suit on, getting the whole mindset going for the wedding.
Well, I may not be wearing a suit, but to me, this jersey is almost as good of a suit after what happened last week. But I digress. Another big thing happened this weekend. We have once again hit an all-time viewership mark. We hit over 150 views on our last video. I just like to thank everybody who watched. We really appreciate it. Once again, if this is your first time watching and you need to know where to find us, we're at Saturday Morning Inspection on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify Podcast. We are SMI Football Show on Twitter, and you can always go to our website, smishow.com, to figure out where we are at. And Nick, I think I left last week off by saying, I am sure there will be something we can talk about this week. And boy, was I right. Firstly, just like last week, there's been another coaching scandal. This one's gone a little bit further. Jon Gruden has been fired for emails that were discovered in the investigation of the Washington football team's front office. What do you have to say?
Miles, I got to give you credit, man. When you're right, you're right. After last weekend with Urban Meyer, you and I talked what could possibly happen to, take this to another level. Well, credit to Vegas and the Raiders for giving us just that. Like you said, Jon Gruden out as the head football coach with the Las Vegas Raiders after those emails surfaced. Obviously, this is a big shock to everyone in the NFL and everyone in football.
We were messaging back and forth through the game on Monday. And when Schefter popped up on the screen and made the announcement, I truly was shocked. My team was getting destroyed at the time, and I was still just like, what just happened? I was shocked. I did not believe what I was hearing. Because you always hear, Jon Gruden from Hard Knocks a few years ago, real team coach guy, knock on wood if you're with me. Like, he just seems like a nice guy. He seems like a player's coach. He seems, like a nice person, but after hearing the comments he made, okay, and there's a few stipulations I would like to make. What he said was terrible. Those are terrible things to say. Those people are dealing with so many things. You can't say those derogatory terms about anybody. It's just not okay. Second of all, though, it's just kind of odd to me that now we're in the business of pulling stuff up from like 10 years ago. And while I agree, maybe we should have looked into him closer in the beginning so we're not in this position where we pull something out 10 years ago. Because I'm sure, I'll be honest with you, I think a majority of coaches, GMs, and owners in the league, if we start digging through their emails, we're going to find the football culture as it has developed is not what it used to be. It has developed a lot in the last 10 years. And we will find something on almost every coach that is equal or worse than what was said by Jon Gruden. That does not abstain him from what he did say. I'm just saying that we're jumping a fine line.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So for me, I'm not going to talk about, what Gruden's punishment should have been versus what it was, or what he said versus, how it's perceived or what he meant or his press conference or any of that. My big topics or my big thoughts on this issue is more of what you've said. I've got three things that kind of jump out at me. This investigation into Washington that's been going on for a few years, they've had these emails for a while. This is not brand new information the NFL has had. So why did the NFL wait till now to release it? There's something weird going on there. Second, it's come out that the NFL has been releasing these emails publicly one at a time while in communication with the Raiders to try and force the Raiders to make a decision to get rid of Gruden. Right? They didn't release it all to the public and let public opinion and the Raiders make a decision. They didn't give Vegas time to make a decision. They basically forced Vegas's hand to say, hey, you're going to get rid of Gruden, or every day there's going to be more and more bad publicity. Now, I don't think that's right personally for the NFL to do that. I think that's acting from a place of false morality. You can say Gruden needs to leave as a head coach and say he's not the right person to leave. That's certainly an opinion a lot of people have. But to act in that way as the league executive office shows false leadership in my mind. It shows poor leadership, shows no leadership, right? You're pushing an organization, a franchise, to make a decision because for whatever reason, right or wrong, the NFL wanted to get rid of Jon Gruden as head football coach of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Absolutely, and I agree. And the more damning part of all of this, who was sending those emails to? Who was he saying that to? Bruce Allen, former president of the Washington football team. Why are we not hearing more about the Washington organization? That's been the story before all of these things have come out. Why are we not condemning Washington more for the nude photo shoots of the cheerleaders that were allegedly in these emails, for the comfortability level for Gruden to send these topics back and forth? Why is Daniel Snyder still allowed to own a team? And it all comes down to a comment that I read. It is a big difference when you sign the checks versus when you receive the checks. If you're signing the checks, this is the big corporate America giant that we deal with. When you have the power, you are out of touch from punishment. And I don't think that is fair. I think that is really a bigger issue that is completely unrelated to the Gruden issue, but it's one that we have to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Right. And the first thing that jumped out in my mind is they announced, I think it was last Sunday, that the Super Bowl halftime show would be headlined by Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Eminem. Now, you and I both grew up in the early 2000s. A lot of people have known Dr. Dre and Eminem's lyrics are far from kid friendly. Eminem himself has been accused of a lot of the things Jon Gruden's being accused of now. But the NFL is hyping up this show and promoting it because they think that's good for business. They think that's good for viewership. They think that's going to drive up some revenue for the individual franchise in the league as a collective. Right. Everything, like you said, everything the NFL is doing it from the perspective of the owners. And for whatever reason, a group of owners in the league office decided Jon Gruden needed to go. Having Jon Gruden as the head coach of the Raiders was a problem. And I agree with you. I think Washington is behind it. As much as we, disparage Washington, they're one of the top 10 most valuable NFL franchises. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They're in a competitive market. They haven't been good for a while, but the fact is they are. They have a very loyal and long-term fan base. They've won 3 Super Bowls. They're one of the earlier NFL franchises. They've been around since the 1930s. They have a lot of power and clout in the league office. And frankly, I think it came to a head when you had Goodell in the league office against Dan Snyder in Washington about all the issues that you talked about going on with that franchise. And Snyder said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a head on a silver platter because I've got one right here. And I guarantee you there's some guys in the NFL office that don't like Gruden to begin with. Snyder or whoever at Washington, I'm not saying it's Snyder, I'm not saying it's not, offered up Gruden's head on a silver platter. And Gruden, to his detriment, has sent a lot of immature and inappropriate emails, put himself in that position. Snyder offered up those emails, and the NFL took their sacrificial lamb, and they got rid of Gruden, when really, just like you said, a lot of the blame, if not all of it, should fall on the Washington organization and their owner, Dan Snyder.
Exactly. And, just some talking points. The Raiders may have wanted to get rid of him anyways. I have some notes here. So Gruden signed a 10-year, $100 million contract in 2018. He became the Raiders head coach. He has stayed for 3 years. In that 3 and 5 games, he has a record of 22-31, losing record, no playoff appearances, and no winning seasons. It's not like he's been, great so far, and the team has been losing steam this year already. I can see them wanting him on board, trying to get him to somehow find a scapegoat clause to get him out of his contract. Anyways, but it's just, this all stems back to we're setting standards. We're saying, It is not okay for this level of person, the coach, Jon Gruden, to do and say these things. And it's not. I agree. It is not okay to do and say these things. But we're saying just don't look over here at what the Redskins have going on in their front office that we have all known about before all of this happened. There will be no punishment. Yeah, they fired some management people, but the root of the problem, there will be no punishment or no reparations for what has happened on this side. And I just think that is when you are willing to sacrifice morality for business, that is when things can get to the way that they are now.
Yeah, and I think it's not even for business, for just revenue or top line or bottom line growth. I think it's a PR. It's a PR battle that the NFL thinks they have to fight, and they don't. It's almost bizarre. They've supported, right? We talk about one of our earlier shows, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has not been suspended yet. Now, obviously, he hasn't been charged or arrested. He's facing some serious allegations, but he hasn't been arrested or indicted, and he's still an active player in the NFL, right? So the NFL is very selective on who they enforce these rules. I mean, they suspended Tom Brady for 4 games. He was the face of the league. A lot of players have done a lot worse things than just mean messages or mean emails or mean tweets or anything like that. And the NFL office has kept them in the game and involved. It's very strange. It's a PR battle they're fighting, which I think is hurting the fans. To be totally honest here, a lot of what Goodell in the front office has done the last few years has been bad for the game. Everyone hates the taunting penalties. These roughing the passer, these unnecessary roughness penalties, they are hurting the game. Everybody hates them. We talk every time there's a big hit. What's the first thing we all do? Where's the flag? Where's the flag?
Yeah, we've been trained to think that now. So
it's so much of what Goodell has done is bad for the game of football itself. I think they're focusing so much on what they think the brand of the NFL should be. I think the NFL's lost its way a little bit here, and I think the blame falls on Goodell, right? They've lost what matters to football fans, and it's not the shield, it's not the NFL logo, it's the game of football. And I think that's what the NFL office has lost track of as they try and fight all these different PR battles. This is one of them. This is the latest one. There's been a lot of them the past few years. They've neglected the issues that really matter with the game of football, and instead they've been focusing on winning, battles in the Twitter sphere and the Facebook sphere and the Instagram sphere, just to get enough likes or retweets or posts. So that way people on ESPN or ABC or NBC or Fox or whoever don't say mean things about Roger Goodell.
Absolutely. Right? We're sacrificing the game of football for this.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just Gruden, right? And I think you and I agree on this 100%. We're seeing it expand into other things, whether it's the penalties, whether it's, different rules and different restrictions they put on players and certain things like that. The different advertising campaigns and things out of left field that seem to come out that the NFL talks about and says they support. It is extremely against the game of football, because anything that's not demonstrating playing the game of football is against it, right? The NFL is a professional football organization, but they focus on things that are outside of professional football. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, think of any business. If you sell like socks, right? Why would you worry about, well, what do people think of when they are running outside and it's windy? It just doesn't make any sense. It's outside your realm. Stay in your lane, understand your business. And the NFL seems to have lost that.
Yeah, I watch football for the most part, not lately, but I watch football to relax. I watch football to get away from it all. I watch football because I enjoy it. I love to have watched it my whole life. I love to watch football. I don't want all of this outside drama to be involved in what I'm watching. I don't want all of these storylines of this guy said this guy said that. That's where you as a business take care of that in-house personally. We don't need to send everything out to the media. We can take, it's like businesses. You don't hear if the guy that works at the McDonald's down the street said something mean to a customer, we don't have a press conference about it. You fire him and you move on. We don't need to, like you said, stake these PR battles all the time. Just do what you have to do, make it right, and then move on. And I think we're losing sight of that.
Yeah, it's, and as much as Jon Gruden is in the wrong by acting immaturely and unprofessionally, even though he wasn't an employee of the NFL at the time or an employee of the Raiders, he was acting as, as an announcer on ESPN, and he was doing some of his other side things. I think right now, as much as, I love football, I see the game kind of tilting kind of on a little bit of an edge here, right? Whether it's these new rules, whether it's all of the, digging up old emails and criticizing former players and coaches and all this stuff coming about. I think it's really hurting the game. I think people, like you said, I love football. Like you said, you love football. We love watching the game. We love watching the players and the athletes and the teams do amazing things, on Sundays and Thursdays and Mondays. And, that's just a special part of, our culture and our life that, you and I and a lot of other people really enjoy and really appreciate what these players and coaches are able to do week in and week out. We don't want to deal with what the NFL, the executive corporate office of the NFL, tries to do with outside the game. And I think that's hurting the game and it's hurting the players. And frankly, it needs to stop because it's becoming a distraction from some amazing things. I mean, we're talking about what the NFL and Jon Gruden is right now, instead of, and we're going to get there, of course, but instead of talking about the amazing things Josh Allen has done or the amazing things that Lamar Jackson did, on Monday night, or Dallas's start, or Justin Herbert's growth, or, this and that, or, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, instead of talking about the players that make this game great, we're talking about this. And it frustrates me. I know it frustrates you. It frustrates a lot of fans. And, I think the NFL, and it starts with Roger Goodell, really needs to understand that and start moving on and doing a better job of managing the game.
And you mentioned we're going to get to everything, but the only drama I want to hear is about all the missed kicks from last weekend. Okay? That's all I want to hear about. So, but I think we've got our piece on that. You brought it up. The other drama I want to know is what the heck happened in Baltimore on Monday night. I don't know. I was watching the game. I thought for sure we are going to lose. I don't know at this point, anything's possible. We could be down 100, and I'm like, well, there's a way that we can win the game. Because I think I saw at one point in time on the ESPN app that Indy had a 98.4% chance of winning the game, and they didn't win the game. So, like we have dubbed it in our intro, it was truly a Monday night miracle. It was a game for the ages. I don't think I've seen anything like it in all of my years watching the NFL.
Yeah, it was certainly a wild affair, and it's truly a testament to Lamar Jackson's growth as a passer, right?
Oh yeah.
And not to bash too much on Brian Griese, but I felt he spent 3 quarters bashing Lamar Jackson as Jackson then had an amazing second half and doing a great job leading the team to this amazing comeback with a number of great decisions and great throws, high accuracy, unbelievable performance by Lamar Jackson. Absolutely outstanding. But for the Colts, the heartbreak that organization has to feel, because down the stretch, if they had 10 different opportunities that felt like where as long as this doesn't happen, we'll be okay. As long as we don't get this kick block, we'll be okay. As long as we don't lose 6 yards on this play, as long as we make this kick, as long as we don't give up a 40-yard bomb to Hollywood Brown, we're okay. As long as we don't give up 2 2-point conversions to Mark Andrews, we'll be okay. Right?
Oh, yeah.
It was so many things that had to go wrong and did go wrong.
In a way, I feel for them more than anyone, is because I'm on the opposite side of those things, but there's been 3 games out of the last 4 where for Baltimore, it's the only way we can win is if we do X. If we can knock a fumble out of the Chiefs running back's hands to get a turnover, or else they drive down the field and beat us. If we can kick the longest field goal in NFL history by a mere inches, we can win the game. And yes, those things have landed our way, and good teams find a way to win. But knowing how sick I felt during those moments, but then we prevail and I'm happy. I can imagine how, upset that they must be. So my heart goes out to them. So a few talking points, like you said, Griese was unnecessarily hard. I think he's going to eat his words. Maybe he'll think next time. Only quarterback ever with 400 plus passing yards to have over an 85% completion percentage. This game marks him to tied the most wins under the age of 25. 34 wins, obviously. He doesn't turn 25 until January, so he's going to beat the record and be the record holder eventually. Another stat, Colts have never lost a game when they were up 16 points in the fourth quarter over the span of 120 games where that was the case. Never, until now, they have lost that game. And the final point that I have, the biggest mistake the Colts made, by far, the worst thing they could have done. Tails never fails. Why do you pick heads in the coin flip, Carson? It's almost like you're trying to sabotage the team. I don't understand what he was doing.
Well, I think, he's a, red-headed guy, right? I think that's that bad luck that comes with that, right? Isn't that what they say?
Oh, yeah. So, well, as soon as Tucker went out there and he said heads, I was like, huh, you know what they say? Tails never fails. And as soon as it hit and the ref says tails, you see the despair in Carson Wentz's face. He's almost like, we're not stopping them.
Well, because they didn't, right? They had given up 3 straight touchdown drives. And before that, Baltimore was about to score, then Jackson fumbled. But I want to hit on the point you talked about the close games that Baltimore's been in. And this is one of my beliefs about the NFL. It's very old school, we'll call it now, New England Patriots with Brady Belichick. When you've got a good coach and a good quarterback, and you've got both of them are playing or coaching well and playing well, a lot of close games and a lot of breaks seem to go your way, right? And that's all about what coaching and quarterback play is. It's taking advantage of opportunities at the quarterback position, and for a coach, putting your guys in positions to win the games, right? It's even when things don't go your way, like Baltimore played terrible in the first half. It was only 10-3, right? If it should have been 17-3 or 20-3 or a score more like that. If that's a score at half, Baltimore never has a chance to get back in the game. That's a credit to Harbaugh and his coaching and even setting up game plans that put his players in positions like that forced fumble on Wentz and that sack in the second quarter to keep the game closer. So that way a great player like Jackson can have the opportunity to lead a comeback. So those close games, like you talked about Kansas City, Detroit, and now against Indianapolis on Monday night, to me, while you feel that as man, why can't we win more games comfortably? That's a good sign. That's a sign of good quarterback play and good coaching. And I think that's a good sign for Baltimore going forward for the rest of the year.
Oh, yeah. And, I say that, but obviously, the exciting games are more fun to watch at the end of the day. Just, we can make it like a little bit less exciting, like a little bit less miraculous. I don't know. But a few last final notes on this before we move on to even weirder topic, even more unbelievable. 2 narratives have been closed. That only leaves one left. One, Lamar can't pass the ball. Obviously, he almost threw for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's closed the book on that narrative. The other narrative, he can't come back from not leading. Like, he cannot make the ground up when they are losing. Obviously, now that has been proven wrong. He came back, and he came back a few weeks before that as well. And he came last year against the Browns. He also comes back from a deficit. So those narratives have been closed. The only thing we can say now is he can't win a championship, and who knows, maybe he proves that in the next coming season. Or this season. You never know.
Yeah, he's had 3 game-winning drives this season, and the one win they had where he didn't get a game-winning drive, he threw for 300 yards against a really good Denver defense. I mean, Jackson is playing at a really high level right now.
You know who is not playing at a high level? 90% of kickers in the NFL. 14 total missed extra points. I don't even know. Crosby himself missed 3 field goals. Cincinnati missed 2. Colts missed 2. I think there was other ones. Houston missed a field goal. Punt was blocked. Crazy bad special teams play outside of one game this year or this week. Obviously, one of the Colts misses. He was hurt apparently, but one of the kicks was blocked by Calais Campbell. But what do you think about all of these missed kicks?
Well, it tells you, right? We kind of forget it, and you're very fortunate as a Baltimore fan to have Tucker, but how consistency at that kicker position and at a lesser level, but sometimes even more important at punter, really provides that extra element to your team, especially in NFL games, which are so close. Right. And you look at Cincinnati, Green Bay. I mean, if one of those kickers, they had 5 tries between the two before Crosby finally made the game winner at the end of overtime. where one of them was going to win. That's the difference between 4-1 and 3-2. At the end of the year, that can be making the playoffs, missing the playoffs. That can be winning the division, getting a home playoff game, and going on the road. I mean, that's massive, and that's just what consistency or lack thereof at the kick position can do, right? And I think a lot of fans maybe lose sight of it. And as much as kickers get a hard rap, and they're not really football players or whatever, it is so important, especially to have a good kicker that's consistently long range. That can make all the difference in the world. And we saw it last weekend, right? Houston, they big chance to almost upset New England. They missed 2 extra points and the field goal, right? They lose by 3. That's a difference in the game, right? That's a big difference. That Houston team, instead of being 1-4 with 4 straight losses, instead they're 2-3, and they just beat Belichick. They're only a game back in that division, the AFC South, if they make those kicks. Yeah. It's a completely different mindset. It's a huge role. And I think people are hopefully now seeing the value of kickers and special teams players in general.
And special teams play crucial. Obviously, I know we have one of the better punters, the best kicker of all time. Great special teams background for Harbaugh. Great special teams coordinators. Dallas has one of my favorite special teams coordinators, and John Fossil. Zerline has been decent, but someone else has a pretty good punter, and we saw some athleticism on display in the Seahawks game. The crazy double punt that I don't even know if that's legal, but somehow it was allowed.
Yeah, absolutely wild. So LA, Los Angeles Rams block a Seattle punt. He picks it up and still punts it again, gets it off. 2 punts in one play. Evidently, it was legal. I didn't know if it was or not. It was an unbelievable job by him, just for self-awareness, just to give it a shot. And to be, first of all, the second punt, even after he has the wherewithal to pick it up,
great
have the second punt. It was a great punt, pinned him deep. It's an absolutely unbelievable play and a great show of athleticism and control on his part. And that's a sort of, now Seattle still ended up losing, the injury to Russell Wilson obviously didn't help them at all. But it tells you how important a big special teams play is. We normally think of it as a punter or a punt returner or a kick returner making a big return to flip the field. But I tell you what, those punters, the ability to coffin corner someone or to pin a team back or a kicker to make a long kick, that is so valuable. And that's a great job by Seattle's punter. I don't even know his name. I don't think most of America knows his name, and I don't think anyone ever will know his name. But that's a memorable play. I don't think anyone will forget for a long time.
Yeah, I think he's from Australia, actually. I think he's an Aussie Rules football player or something along those lines. But I don't remember what his name was. But anyways, good for him. Once we figure out what your name was, good for you.
I'm just going to call him Crocodile Dundee if he's from Australia.
Exactly. Lamar wasn't the only one to set records this weekend. Rodgers is sole possession of 5th place with 422 passing touchdowns. He's officially passed Phillip Rivers. Antonio Brown, what was his record?
Yeah, so he's became the fastest player in terms of games to reach 900 career catches in NFL history.
Okay. And you have some interesting notes on this. What do you think? Is Antonio Brown a Hall of Famer?
I think at this point you have to make the argument that he is, right? Barring injuries, he's going to end up with 1,000 career catches. That's sort of a big cutoff in terms of, it's like 3,000 hits in baseball, or 40,000 passing yards as a quarterback, 10,000 rushing yards as a running back, where you start getting just on stats alone. And then you factor in he won the Super Bowl with Tampa last year and had a big playoff run. For a 3 or 4 year window there with Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh, he was the best receiver in football, pretty much undisputably. He's been a great special teams guy. Obviously, he's had some issues off the field and on the field. But at the end of the day, his numbers, his resume, his performance, his athletic gifts, his highlights, all across the board, he looks like a Hall of Famer. And I think he is. I think Antonio Brown will find himself in the Hall of Fame one day.
I don't think it's any question. Statistically, he is a Hall of Famer. It's just how much do off-the-field issues play into whether you are a Hall of Famer or not. How much longer does he play? If he plays for 2 or 3 more years, I think it's no question. If he has no problems, then those things will be laid to bed, kind of buried in his past, and he can move on from them. So we'll just have to see the longevity of the career past those issues. And he's definitely going to make it in there.
You think Rodgers will make it? I think he's on the outside looking in right now, right?
You said who?
Rodgers.
Yeah, 50, I think 50. He maybe need another year or so. We'll have to see. You know, maybe he has to break all of the records first before he gets in. But someone who may also be in the record books, Urban Meyer and the Jags, as the luckiest man in America. We all said, Urban has the spotlight on him. He has to win this game. He didn't win the game. But somehow the spotlight has been removed. He can think, you wonder if the Urban Meyer camp was in the NFL office saying, hey guys, look at this. We found these emails. Let's go ahead and press these things on out there. Clear the news cycle. Get some new stories going out there. Everyone forgets about Urban. But Urban, we have not forgotten. They lose again. The Jags suck. Truly the only team in the NFL right now that I think, man, they suck, and they're probably safe to say you're going to beat them.
Yeah, I mean, they've lost all 5 games. Obviously, they're 0-5. 4 of them have been by double digits. They lost by 18 at home to Tennessee. Derrick Henry ran over them. They didn't do a whole lot offensively. Obviously, they only scored 19 points. Trevor Lawrence didn't play bad. He had a decent game, threw for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown, was pretty productive. Didn't throw an interception. I almost feel bad for him more than anything else because I think he's got talent. I think we're kind of seeing the importance of leadership a little bit out of the quarterback position, right? I think he's kind of been a quiet leader. He never really had to be a team, a Brady, a Rodgers kind of Mahomes kind of guy at Clemson because he was just surrounded by talent and had Dabo Swinney as kind of the leader of that organization. Right now, Jacksonville is looking for Trevor Lawrence, fair or unfair, to be the leader of that organization because Urban Meyer couldn't do it, right? He decided, going to a bar in Columbus, Ohio is more important than leading an NFL franchise. Interesting decision, Urban. Not my decision, but, interesting on your part.
It is a decision.
It is a decision, exactly. And now it's on Trevor Lawrence, right? Can he be the leader? The thing with Lawrence, I don't see him on the podium, the press conferences. I see Wilson. I see Mac Jones. I even see Trey Lance, doing that kind of stuff. I don't see Trevor Lawrence, being that vocal public face of the organization. They need him to be that, right?
Yeah.
This is things like that where we talked about Tebow with Urban Meyer a little bit last week. For all of Tebow's flaws as a player in the NFL, certainly as a quarterback, he was really, really good at the podium, in the locker room after a win or a loss.
Fantastic speaker, fantastic leader.
Yes, and because it's hard, right? It's not easy to be the face of an organization, especially when you're a 20-something player, still just trying to win games and figure out a way to get better as a player in the NFL in a really tough competitive environment. And Trevor Lawrence hasn't done that yet. Doesn't mean he won't. He just hasn't yet. He didn't have to do it in college. That was one of the potential concerns coming out to Jacksonville is, hey, how is he going to handle losing and being the leader of a losing team? Frankly, he hasn't done much leading, at least in the public eye yet. I'm looking at you, Trevor. I'm looking at you to be the public face of this team. You're the number 1 overall pick. You're the golden boy, both literally and figuratively. You need to go out there and not just play well and not just continue to grow as a quarterback, but continue to grow as a leader, the public face of the Jaguars organization, because Urban Meyer has failed you. It's on you now to take that mantle.
Oh, yeah. I think 2 points here. They're not making the Super Bowl this year. They're not even making the playoffs this year. So do what you can do. Don't focus on those things. You're not going to get there. You just won't get there. Do what you can do. You said step up, be the leader, show people your progression as a quarterback, work on yourself, and work on being that leader. And I think that's the best thing that he can do for himself.
Absolutely.
Some other teams who may not be as good as we thought they were. Broncos seem to be a mirage of sorts after their loss to Pittsburgh. That's 2 straight losses to 2 good teams. They were only able to beat the bad teams, it seems. We'll see how they go looking forward. Carolina's also fading a little bit, or is Philly gaining? Who knows? We will see the rest of that in the coming weeks, but Carolina's a slide, maybe coming back down to earth. Darnold was playing out of his mind. Maybe he's settling back in a little bit. Las Vegas, they're also sliding as well. Is the Gruden circus kind of got them distracted? I think they're going to have a hard time continuing with all of that going on for the rest of the season. Those are the 3 things that we wrote down as far as teams not being as good as they seem.
Right. Like all three of those teams started 3-0, and people were like, whoa, Denver, Vegas, Carolina, contenders. They're going to be, are these playoff teams? Is there a little upsetting the apple cart going on in the NFL? And the answer is doesn't look that way,
Probably
right?
not.
I mean, Denver, they've made strides, and give them credit. 3 wins is 3 wins, no matter who you play. The National Football League is tough, but they've lost 2 games. They got absolutely dominated by Baltimore, and they were dominated by Pittsburgh. They made a run at the end, great comeback, came up a little short, but still to lose back-to-back games. Pittsburgh's not a great team. They're maybe a decent team, maybe not a great team. I think this was a missed opportunity for Denver. Carolina, I mean, we talk great about Sam Darnold, then he throws 3 picks. This can't be what Sam Darnold is. If he's like this, the wheels are going to fall off Carolina very quickly. His mantra has to be use his legs to convert third downs, get rid of the football to DJ Moore, Tommy Tremble, and Robbie Anderson on time with accuracy, and don't turn the ball over. They've got a good defense. They've got a good offensive line, or at least a decent offensive line, good enough to run the ball a little bit. Turnovers are going to kill him. Darnold can't do this. He's got to know not to do this. This is a huge disappointment for the Carolina organization and for Darnold. I mean, I called Adam Gase, any player coached by Adam Gase, the worst player in the NFL. I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit, as bad as Darnold was against Philly, because Philly was not a good defense. Kansas City smoked Philly. Dallas smoked Philly. This is not a good sign for Sam Darnold. He's got to turn around and fast. In Vegas, obviously they have the distractions. I don't know what to make them. I think the wheels fall off, right? With Gruden gone, say what you want about Gruden. He was a very good offensive game planner. He knew how to use the tools. They were in a lot of games, obviously started 3-0.
I think he was Baltimore. The emotional leader of that team.
Exactly. Because we brought up Trevor Lawrence. Derek Carr is I think he's not a bad guy, but he's not a great, vocal public face of that organization. Jon Gruden was. And with him gone, it's going to fall on Derek Carr. And that's just not who Derek Carr is as a player and as a quarterback. I think his play takes a step back. I think the team's distracted. I don't see the Raiders making the playoffs. They probably finished with a losing season. I don't see how they recover from this.
And who else cannot recover for 5th straight week in a row? The poor Detroit Lions. I don't know. Like I said, Baltimore's been winning by miracles. Detroit has been losing by miracles every week. Another walk-off field goal. What more to say? Campbell in tears at the podium. You just feel for him.
Yeah, and to kind of juxtapose that against Urban Meyer, right? You got Urban Meyer, who was an absolute idiot, did his thing in Columbus, didn't fly back with his team. And now it falls on Trevor Lawrence, right? Like we just talked about. You've got Dan Campbell, who's up there in front of the podium after every loss, bearing his heart on his sleeve, doing everything he can. I mean, they get back in the game 16-15 when DeAndre Swift scores in the final minute. He goes for 2. That's confidence, right? That's putting it on your players to make plays. Players respond to that, right? I think a lot of coaches, the way they interact with players, you can kind of tell when they're fake or when they're not really meaning it, or if they're just acting like an ulterior motive or something like that. The way Dan Campbell appears in public, the way he coaches that team, the way his players fight, they're responding to him. I think Detroit just doesn't have the talent. I think they've been unlucky. But I tell you, it's just such an opposite to me of leadership. When you look at Urban Meyer and his shortcomings and what Dan Campbell has done with that Detroit organization and that team, I don't know if they're going to ever be good under Dan Campbell. It's hard. That Detroit's never been a really consistently good franchise to begin with. They don't get a lot of good free agents.
Well, I think they were a mediocre team who became bad with the switch from Goff to Stafford, or from Stafford to Goff. So hope I have hope. I like Campbell. He seems like a good coach. I don't know about his game planning so much, but what he can do is, like we said, another huge emotional vocal leader of his team. He gets those guys fired up. We have a bad team almost winning every game.
Right. And not only is he getting them fired up, he is shielding them from everything. We're talking about Dan Campbell right now. We're not talking about Jared Goff or DeAndre Swift or the defense or anything like that. We're talking about Dan Campbell. and all the criticism, all the praise, it sort of diffuses and doesn't really become a distraction to the players. And trust me, like that really matters, right? When you've got a collective group of people, and especially a football team that are really in it together and are committed, you get the kind of effort that Detroit plays in week in and week out. Now, obviously, their talent is very short, so it's going to be harder to win games. But as a fan of the game, and that's kind of what football almost is about, right? Is competing. Even if you've got less talent, finding a way to get in the game, giving yourself a best chance to win. And I want to be honest, going forward the rest of the season, I'm rooting a lot for Detroit. I think what Dan Campbell has done is unique in today's corporate NFL. I mean, you've got a lot of coaches that almost seem to be more suit and tie guys, GM suit and tie guys. And you've got a lot of we'll hit analytics a little later, but you got a lot of the MIT and Harvard guys now in the league. And Dan Campbell's a throwback. The players respond to that. And I like what he's doing in Detroit. I'm rooting for Dan Campbell.
Real quick, we'll go through our last topics to sort of get on this. We've been on our review, but like we said, there's been a lot that happened this week, a ton. So Herbert, magical performance again. Another close game, another great win by then, another questionable loss by Cleveland. Why can't they hold on to the games? I think they're just the quarterback play is what is holding them back.
Absolutely right. And they're good enough. They've got Cleveland. They're good enough and they're talented enough to probably make it to the playoffs and maybe even win a playoff game like they did last year. But when they play the good teams with better quarterback play, Herbert outduels Mayfield, right? And a lot of quarterbacks do that. Mahomes beat Mayfield week 1. Credit to Baker Mayfield for beating, Tyrod Taylor, right? Or Kirk Cousins, right? That's what Baker can do with this great roster around him. He can't beat the big guys like Herbert's become. And not really to be too big of a knock on Baker because, I know he's really busy. He's making a lot of money with those commercials. So good on him for doing that. But I think what Herbert is doing is just elevating to the next level and showing that difference between a decent, good team and a great team. I think that's what the Chargers are taking big steps towards becoming.
And I think Baker just really needs to think, listen, you're so good. If you leave the NFL, I'm sure Progressive will still have you on. I don't know what else to say. It's he's focus is elsewhere and he's doing great there. So just keep going that way. Just leave and go there. What more do you want? Quickly, San Francisco is really struggling without Jimmy G. I don't know if Lance is good or bad. All I can tell you is at this point in the game, when they weren't expecting him to be in, he doesn't look great.
Yeah, so I've got it written down with Lance at quarterback. They were 3 for 11 on third down, 1 for 5 on fourth, less than 200 yards passing, 10 points. Look, he's a rookie. It's not going to be perfect by any means. We all get that. Kittle was out, injury at left tackle with Williams. So they're a hurt team, right? It's a tough situation for any quarterback to go into, rookie or not. But, we hit on it on our earlier shows. I know I talk about all the time with Jimmy Garoppolo. Shanahan is a championship coach. Without him, he's a 30% winner. He's a bottom tier coach. He knows it, right? He wants this bye with Garoppolo to get healthy as fast as possible. They're going into the bye. They need Garoppolo back. Lance isn't ready. Maybe Lance gets there eventually, but 10 points in a game against Arizona ain't going to cut it. No passing touchdowns, 1 interception. That's just not going to get it done. And they need Garoppolo back, and they need Garoppolo back soon.
Yeah, there's no question he's going to be raw coming out of college like that. But they do need Jimmy back. And finally, touch on this briefly, but it is super important. Buffalo looks great. They played what we would say is a medium to high team. They're a pretty good Kansas City offense, a very bad Kansas City defense, but still they absolutely roll. Their defense performs on the road. They look great. I am nervous about Buffalo. I would say between LA and Buffalo, those are the two teams I'm the most worried about in the AFC.
Yeah, and we talked about Kansas City's defense last week. We each picked a different DB as one of our top 5 worst players in the NFL. I picked Sorensen, the safety. He had an absolutely miserable game.
He got
Dawson
burned
Knox
about 4 times that I saw for touchdowns.
Oh yeah, I mean it's Dawson Knox who is a good player. This guy isn't Randy Moss. Burned him numerous times. He's really, really bad. They can't hide him. Teams, I think, are starting to figure out Kansas City's defense. Mahomes has thrown 6 picks through 5 games. He is not the same player as he's been these last few years. This offense is still dynamic, But without Mahomes, being superhuman or, taking care of the football better, they're not nearly the team they are. Look, they're 2-3 right now. Kansas City's a losing team. Buffalo just dominated them. They lost to Baltimore. They could have lost to Kansas City. They had a tough game against Philly, right? I don't think this is a great Kansas City team. I think they probably get into the playoffs just on the strength of their talent alone. But this is a team that, unless they fix this defense, they're not making a deep run. And likewise, Buffalo, I think, is gearing up for a deep run. This was a big win for them to kind of overcome an obstacle in Kansas City.
Absolutely. All right. A great review, great breaking news segment. But what we're all excited for is our deep dive topic this week. I think everyone's done a lot of research on this to get our mind in the right place. Are you ready for some trivia, Nick?
Hit me. Let's do it.
All right. So pay attention. This isn't just NFL players. What college has the most NFL Hall of Famers?
Southern Cal.
Correct, but it is a tie. Can you name the other team?
Oh my goodness. Notre Dame.
You got both. Both of them have 13 Hall of Famers. Congratulations. And number 2 is Michigan with 11, and 3 Ohio, 10, then Miami, Pittsburgh, Alabama, Syracuse, Minnesota, and Illinois.
Yeah, so Miami is the weird one, right? Because I think if there's a run there where they have so many, and you wonder, was that enough to overcome some of the other guys? But I think
they had 9 Hall of Famers on one Miami team.
Oh yeah, so they were stacked for like a 10-year run, basic 20-year run there. But yeah, okay, I like it. Let's get going. I feel hot now, 2 for 2.
All right, we brought this up earlier in the show. In-game analytics is our deep dive topic for the week. First of all, I did a lot of research. I'd like to touch on my sources. I went to The Ringer. I read the Operations and Research on Football paper published by Virgil Carter and Robert E. McCall, a Samford University article, and a few Sports Illustrated articles. Before we get started, I think it's very important, before we talk about in-game analytics, to explain what are analytics. My definition that I have, correct me if you have any other differing opinion, analytics is the process of discovering, interpreting, and communicating significant patterns in data. Quite simply, analytics helps us see insights and meaningful data that we might otherwise not detect. And they help us determine what is the most mathematically correct option to select.
Right. It's all about decision making, right? Is using, instead of experience or using gut feel or maybe advisors, it's using raw data and applying it in such a way that you think will improve your decision making abilities in different situations.
And then I think the most important thing to cover next is, how can analytics help us? What can we use this data to help us look at? And there's many ways. And some examples would be things like going for it on 4th down, going for 2 points after a touchdown. An interesting one I read about, defensive linemen run more from the bench to the field than they do in actual gameplay. There's something we can touch on there later. Running plays to the long side of the field. The use of computer chips and pads, and the tracking how fast players run, all that kind of stuff. All kinds of things, but I'm not going to take the floor on all of this. I kind of got us started. I'll let you roll into what you have written down.
Right. So for me, analytics is sort of used in conjunction, right? You can never use it by itself, using data to drive your decision making. The risk with using data to drive your decision making, anything, not just football, is if your data is bad or your model is bad, your decision is bad, right? Garbage in, garbage out is how that's commonly referred to. So give you an example, right? Going back a while, let's say, Derek, let's use Derrick Henry in Tennessee. Usually this happens with teams that have a good running back. The Titans win 80% of the games that Derrick Henry runs the ball 30 times. All right, so let's fast forward to a game and Tennessee's down 25-14 14 with 2 minutes to go, but Derrick Henry only has 27 carries. All right, well, the best thing for them to do is to get Derrick Henry the ball 3 times, right? No, of course not. The best thing to do is to try and score quickly, throwing the ball deep down the field. So that's kind of a careful application of the data to understand, hey, it's not just a snapshot of information and then trying to apply it to a game. There's some interpretation and modeling that has to occur. I think for me, when I look at data and decisions, I think more of overarching strategy. I know you and maybe other people think of maybe individual discrete decision-making points. So when I think of data, data analysis and overarching strategy, I like to think of what I call momentum management, right? Momentum in a game, we feel it, we see it, is when the tide shifts back and forth between different teams and different situations throughout the natural flow of the game. I think that human element of momentum has to be managed, and you can use that doing data and analytics to determine, the best plays and best situations and best strategies to use when you have momentum, when you don't have it, or when momentum is kind of neutral. For example, if you have momentum, that's when you execute your game plan. That's when you run your plays. That's where if you have a good 4th and 2 play and you get to the 4th and 2, you run it. If you have a good 2-point play, maybe that's when you run it. You have a good fake punt, that's when you run it, right? If momentum's against you, hey, that's when it's time to be aggressive, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you go away from your game plan, but it means, hey, turn up the notch. Let's say, instead of thinking, well, maybe in the best situation to do in this is to just run the ball at the middle and try and get a first down. No, play action, go over the top, or vice versa. If the best decision is, to be in a soft coverage, no, blitz, right? So you want to kind of manage the momentum there from that perspective if it's against you. If it's neutral, that's where I say you tend conservative, right? That's say you don't go for 2, right? If it's kind of a back and forth slow game, you don't really know, both teams still haven't been able to separate. Look, why go for 2 and potentially risk losing your momentum, right? Because at that point, you're just trying to protect yourself and wait for your opportunity to pounce. So that's how I view it, right? I kind of juggle the human side of it, the momentum side, and the data side to learn how to best take advantage of that momentum. Because it gets to a point where eventually the human beings, the players, have to make the plays, right? You can,
yeah.
You can have all the, you can have all the best data in the world, but eventually someone's got to catch the ball, someone's got to block that pass rusher, someone's got to tackle the quarterback or knock down the pass. Eventually, someone has to make the play, and I think that's juggling. That is what coaches have to be really keen on doing. Here, I know you've got some thoughts. What do you have?
Well, and touching on some examples of how this can be used, and this kind of touch. Yes, there's a lot more of individual stats I was focusing on, but those stats help you do your overarching theme. Like some things I saw are stats comparing things, saying that pass coverage is far more important on defense than pass rush, because pass rush can be, they can scheme against pass rush. You know what I mean? You can have guys chipping, you can have guys blocking. So pass coverage is much harder to out scheme than pass rush is. Giving up the ball with a punt for better defensive field position is far less valuable than the chance to retain the football. And we think, oh, obviously that's correct. But like we say, it really shows you gain so much more by going for it on maybe 4th and 5 and converting than you would by punting it and pinning them on the 10. There's just if you have any gumption that you could make it, it really, really shows that that's the best decision to go for. And another analytic or statistical thing, and then I'll go into more of the some history that I read. But another thing that I thought was very interesting is the archaic mindset of focusing on third downs. Every team's judged by, they're 10 of 12 on third downs, or X of Y on 3rd or 4th down, and this is a stat that we all have fixated on in the past. I was reading some data, and it says it is much more important to track how much yardage or success is gained on 1st and 2nd downs than it is for 3rd downs. For instance, focus more on picking up long passing plays on 1st down gives you much more success than running the ball twice on 1st and 2nd down and then trying to convert on 3rd down. If you can get the majority of your yardage in the 1st down, it sets you up for so much more success than it would be waiting to try to convert it at the end of that down. first and second downs are very crucial. Because second and short is much easier to convert than third and short. You know what I mean? So this advocates more for taking shots down the field on first down and second down. Analytics also show pass efficiency is much more important than yards per carry on running. So be that as it may. But all of this I brought back to is this analytics is great, but football hasn't always been about analytics. And I kind of wanted to get into a little bit about how analytics kind of started, who started it, how is it developed, and then how is it being used today. And maybe we can even get in a little bit to who's using it the best and who's not using it, and does that show? So, the analytical revolution in the NFL, I don't know if you knew this or not, from my research, it started somewhere around 1971. And this was the publishing of an academic paper titled Operations Research on Football. Who was this written by? Virgil Carter, who at the time was a backup quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. This was also the quarterback that was put into place. He was the backup. I can't remember who the starter was. The starter went down. He goes in, and this is when Bill Walsh's West Coast offense was invented. Virgil Carter did not have the strongest arm, so Walsh devised a scheme to do more short-range, quick passes to accentuate his skill set that he did have, which is just kind of like a fun fact and almost a precursor that Bill Walsh was really, whether he realized it or not, one of the guys to really focus on analytical thinking rather than old school thinking. He was way far ahead of his time in what he did. But Virgil Carter published this paper with Roger Machall, I believe. I could be pronouncing it wrong. I'm sorry if I did, Robert. I know you're listening. Who was a systems engineer. And the culmination of all this data, they gathered play-by-play data from all NFL teams at the time, except one. The Raiders would not give them their data. And this was not widely available for people at the time. So from that year, they gathered all the play-by-play data, which was 8,373 plays, and there was also a litany of variables that was pumped into their data source, such as down and distance on those plays, what was the score at the time, even so far as what was the temperature outside in the play. And all of these things, they compiled the data to find trends, to see, what can we learn from all of this. And we spoke about the Raiders, and I thought it was funny because in my later research, I found, even still today, Jon Gruden was one of the coaches who kind of bucks the system on analytics, and he still wants to be more of an old school coach. But so, all of this compilation of data, they didn't necessarily use it into the best of its ability, but what they did do was they started thinking about it. And what I read basically was once they compiled this data, they brought it to coaches around the league, and they're like, hey, or front office, and hey, look at this. We need to go for it more on fourth downs. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. That seems crazy. But then the next iteration of all of this, Chip Kelly kind of was a big analytical guy. It didn't really work out for him too much. But the next evolution in that was the 2014 Philadelphia Eagles and Doug Peterson were really some of the people who started aggressively backing analytics. I believe you remember, they would go for it on fourth down all the time, especially in the Super Bowl run, and they would go for two all the time. They were the ones who really started just going for two all the time, and it worked out for them. And all of this coincided with another data gathering process we're all familiar with, Zebra Technologies and their competitor now Catapult. They used RFID technology in stadiums and on players' shoulder pads to gather all of this information. They were the first team to adopt this tech, and now widely, I think everyone pretty much uses it, but they were the first team to gather this tech, and that company paired with this little group that we may have heard about called Amazon Web Services, and they form Next Gen Stats. And with these, they all compiled all the data to come up with all these variables teams looked at, like fastest ball carriers, longest plays, fastest sacks, longest tackles, improbable completions, and incredible yards after catch. I have more, but I'm going to stop because I'm dominating the conversation. I've spit out a bunch of information. What do you think about all of this? Do you remember any of this happening, or did you know any of these things?
Yeah, so Bill Walsh and I grew up next to each other in the 1950s in California. So I know, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, so obviously Walsh in Cincinnati with Paul Brown, they were an expansion franchise, right? So they had to get creative. And like any, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So that's where Walsh started thinking about these principles. He had Ken Anderson, who was not a strong arm guy to begin with. And then obviously they lose him, like you mentioned, and they had to go to Virgil Carter, who was even less stronger arm. I think it all, like the data part is all important and valuable, right? But it comes down to also you have to have the right players, right? Philly didn't win the Super Bowl because they had an analytical process. They won the Super Bowl because they had more talented players and their analytics gave them a slight edge. So it's all figuring out what your edge is, right? If you think you can be more aggressive on fourth down and that gives you an edge over your opponents, then that's fantastic, because you have to think of a way to be different. How are you different than everybody else, right? I think this is something that New England was famously do, right? On defense, if a 3-4 defense, 3 down defensive linemen and 4 linebackers was popular, they'd switch to what's called a 4-3 defense, which is 4 defensive linemen with, down and 3 linebackers, right? Their whole point is just to be different, to give teams something different to think about and a different approach and kind of mess with the game flow of other teams. New England would have a left-footed punter, for example, just anything to be a little different. Now, like you mentioned with Chip Kelly, he had a lot of analytical approaches that did not work for him in the NFL at all. He was fired from Philadelphia and then fired from San Francisco not long after that. So I think it still hinges on the talent side. I think that matters a lot. I don't think it's necessarily, when it comes to data, I don't think it's necessarily about, using data means you're going to win or improve better. I think it's figuring out how you can be different in the same way that a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator tries to think of a game plan to take advantage of weaknesses in a different way to attack an opposing team. I think analytics allows you to think of different ways to do some of the same. It's like, okay, we know we like our matchups on fourth down or on 5 yards and in plays, 3rd and 5, 2nd and 5, 4th and 5. So guess what? We're going to go for it a lot on fourth down and 5 and less because we like those matchups, and based on understanding, hey, and guess what? We've also got data saying that going on fourth down, going for it on fourth down is a good decision in a lot of ways, supporting your win probabilities and things like that you mentioned. It kind of helps reinforce that, right? So it comes down to, beginning in, it comes down to players and coaches. You have to have a good game plan and you have to have good players. In the end, if you don't have that, it doesn't matter. But what analytical approaches can do is look for you to find different ways to go about it. So the famous way that a lot of people have heard about is the Moneyball approach in baseball with Oakland Athletics.
Yes.
So one of the big statements that happened during that event in the early 2000s is they lost a superstar. I believe it was Johnny Damon or Jason. It was Jason Giambi, actually. I'm sorry. And they were looking to replace him. And the scouting department says, well, how do we draft another Jason Giambi? It's like, we don't have to draft another Jason Giambi. We just have to find 3 players that get the level of production of a Jason Giambi, so, instead of paying $50 million for Giambi and $5 million for 2 other backup players, let's pay $15 million, $15 million, $15 million for 3 players that in aggregate get that level of production. So again, it's just a different way of thinking, a different level of approach. You still need good players. You still need players to produce. But instead of worrying so much about, well, we either have Patrick Mahomes or we just won't win a Super Bowl. Or if we don't have Aaron Rodgers, we stink, or we don't have Brady or whoever, we don't have Aaron Donald, pick a superstar, go about it maybe a different way. And you can use analytics and data, especially in games, to look for different ways to use the players you have to overcome some of those deficiencies and to accentuate your strengths. And that's sort of what it comes down to, is looking at games from a different perspective, not just going on gut feel and seeing if you can, out execute a team if the team's better than you, at traditional ways, looking at things differently, applying things differently. And I think that's what the best way of using this data analytics allows teams to do.
And as far off as it may seem that we are, that is exactly what my conclusion is all about. So in conclusion, analytics, as we have said, are a deep and wide source of information. Vast source of information, and cannot give you the exact formula on how to win games. But what they can do is help remove some of the human error from an equation, and it can help reassure you on which decisions are the most beneficial ones to make. And although when you make a decision, the human element of the players can change the outcome, you know that statistically the call was right. The call was the right call to make, but maybe your player is the anomaly in the equation, did not execute the call correctly. And also, it can help show you more of the things. It narrows your vision down, and it shows you what you need. It can help you tune out the things you don't need to look at and help you look at the things that are most important in game planning and aiding your decision process. And I think something we're going to get in later on down the road, possibly after the season this year, is analytics plays a huge part in the draft process. And there's so much more that we can get into on that. And I'm very excited about talking about that and the scouting process, but there's so much more to the whole thing. And I think we're kind of on the same page, so to speak, on what is analytics are used for.
Right. And I think my final point, I think you hit on something big there, is that there is so much action and activity going on in game. You have to manage personalities, players, injuries, refs, the other team, adjustments, but all these are all things coaches have to do, and they have to do it instantaneously, essentially, and then call the next play right away. They have to react immediately and start over with the next play, next sequence of downs. So what using some analytics and some data-driven decision-making can do is it can remove some of the workload and remove some of the thinking, right? It's almost like an assembly line where the workers don't have to think and figure out as much. They just have to do their tasks, right? They're just, okay, my job is to just put on this panel and screw it in, and then put on the next panel and screw it in. If you have data-driven decision-making, then okay, I know I have to focus on, to beat this team, I have to focus on these 5 things. I can't focus on these other 5 things. So I'm going to use the data-driven decision model to come up with, all of my decisions and those 5 things that I don't think are as important, and let me focusing on things that are. I think that right there is the future and the best way to use the data. And I think teams that are successful using analytics, I think that's how they do it. I think they use the data, they delegate the data. That's what I'm going to use. Data delegation. That's a new buzzword for you. To tasks that aren't as important, that allows them to focus on the in-game activities that are.
I absolutely agree. And I think finally, to end off this segment, which I think is one of our best deep dives we've done so far, I'd like to touch on the top 5 teams who do use data analysis and the top 5 teams who don't, to see if we can contract our own opinions, our own data, so to speak, if it's working, if data is the truth. So first off, let's look at the top 5 teams who do use data analysis. In number 5, there is a tie, San Francisco 49ers and the Buffalo Bills. Tied for 4th, so that's 2 teams right there. I'd say pretty good overall. Yeah. In sole possession of 3rd place, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it makes sense even coming from the Chip Kelly era where they started to look into data analysis. That's helped them carry over into the Peterson era, which eventually won them a Super Bowl. So obviously that was successful. Next up has been the Cleveland Browns. They've gone from being the worst team in the NFL to a pretty scary team from time to time. They haven't completed the cycle yet, but they're getting there. So I see steady improvement. And lastly, at number 1, the Baltimore Ravens are the number 1 team as far as analytic-based approach through this survey of teams that have said which teams use the most analytics. So what do you think on those?
Yeah, so I think, as with any survey, it's interesting to see what the criteria is. I think when you look at the teams that are the best teams in the NFL right now or have been the last few years, it's interesting not to see New England at the top of that list, right? Because everyone thinks of Belichick as being this great, really logical, rational thinker. And I think his combination of using some data and some just gut feel and experience is one of the reasons why the Patriots have been successful.
They're
But you can't
tied
deny.
for 8th.
Okay, so they're not too far off. But yeah, I think it's not too big of a surprise. I think one of the things that I think is very interesting about that list, right? You look at Baltimore, Cleveland, San Francisco, Buffalo to a lesser degree, and Philly, right? What is something that all those teams have in common? They have mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So
That's
I think
very true.
when you have a mobile quarterback, I think that opens up the offense a little bit more. And it maybe thinks kind of expands your thinking and game planning a little bit and thinking, if I got a guy that can get outside the pocket or run for a first down, maybe that allows me to think more about going for it on 4th down or going for 2, because it basically is an extra guy. So and I think that's a credit to those teams for understanding that, right? To understand, hey, I've got a guy who can move. I want to take advantage of that by thinking more about going for it on 4th down, going for 2 and things like that, because I've got a quarterback who's a good athlete who can make plays with his legs as well as his arm. I don't want to hamstring him by forcing him to get just 1 shot to get a first down on 3rd down. I want to give him 2 shots because he's that good of an athlete. So I think it's that combination. It's understanding who you got and then figuring out how to apply it. I think that's very interesting.
And to finish this segment off, let's look at the teams who don't use analytics. Starting from, I guess, the 5th spot, which is the team who would use the most out of this, but so they're 5th to last. Pittsburgh Steelers, old school organization. You kind of see it how they play. They're ailing lately. They've been in a decline. Maybe the analytics tell them to move on from Big Ben, but they're not listening to it. Tied for 3rd, New York Giants and Cincinnati Bengals. 2 teams, one is getting better, one is bad. Do analytics show they maybe need to follow it more? In 2nd place, odd one in the trend, Tennessee Titans. I don't know. We can maybe discuss a little bit about what that says. And finally, the team who uses the least amount of analytics, Washington Football Team.
Yeah, so there's a couple themes there, right? Is you look at teams like the Giants and Cincinnati, they're better this year, but they've been bad for a really, really, really long time. And these are teams that have been bad and there's really no excuse to not turn to some data-driven approach. And you can throw Washington in this too, right? Where it's like, look, you haven't scouted well. You haven't had good coaches and game plan. You haven't been great. You don't have a great level of talent. So you guys, you have no excuse. They're not thinking differently, right? They're just saying, we're going to roll out the football and see if we can beat you with our talent and our coaching. Well, they can't. The last decade or so has shown that for those franchises. So I think that's kind of an indication of the organization. Like you said, old school, older, stodgy organizations, and they haven't reacted to the fact they have a low level of talent. Pittsburgh is interesting. I think Pittsburgh's in a tough situation because they've had so much success with Roethlisberger. I mean, Tomlin's never had a losing season. So at a certain point, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think they may be getting to the point where it is broke. They got to fix it. Tennessee, I think it's just because they have Derrick Henry, right? If you got a guy like Derrick Henry, you just
you'll have some level of success,
Yeah, and analytics be darned. You're just giving him the football, right? I mean, that's.
And I think outside of Pittsburgh, what we could say about those other 4 teams, Washington, Tennessee, Cincinnati, and New York, not known for great front offices.
No, and I'd agree with that 100%. And not only not known for great front offices, but not known for great coaching staffs either, right? I mean, when's the last time since Coughlin, in New York? Cincinnati's gone through a number of coaches. Rivera seems to be doing okay in Washington, but
they've
jury's
had
still out.
Multiple coaches ever since the 90s. They've had a carousel, so to speak. So
oh yeah. So I think that plays a role, right? If you don't have a good organization up top and you're not stable in the coach, I think that that kind of shines to light some of the things you're talking about. You're not taking advantage of some of the tools that can be available to you.
And I think so. Very quick summary. What we have noticed, and through all of this information, using analytics can help boost a team to be a great team. Not using analytics can really hinder your team and can make teams that are great subpar at times. So I think it's very beneficial. And like you said, this is the future of football. In some capacity, using analytics-based decision making is going to be the future of football. And now our own analysis of worst to first, the AFC East. So I talked a lot in that last one. I will let you kick these off for us. So worst to first, AFC East. Starting from the bottom to the top, what do you got?
Yeah, so I got number 4. I got Miami. Maybe a little surprise there. I am so disappointed in this organization and this coaching staff and this roster, right? This was a team that won 10 games last year. They lost the playoffs on a wild card. 2 years ago, they were tanking, but they still won 5 games. Brian Flores is the coach. I thought this guy was a potential coach of the year candidate, dark horse coming in. Maybe, if Buffalo had taken a step back, Miami takes a step up, maybe they even steal the division. They are bad. Yes, I know Tua got hurt, but Tua wasn't really doing a whole lot for them to begin with. Brissett was bad. He's been bad. It's not getting better. They got absolutely killed by Buffalo, absolutely killed by Tampa. Their only win was by New England at home in week 1, and that's because New England fumbled the game away at the very end. They should have lost that game. This is a 1-4 team, and they are not very good at all. Very disappointing in them.
Sorry,
number 3 is the New York Jets, right? And New York Jets are bad too. But I tell you what, I like a lot of Zach Wilson, right? This guy fights. This guy competes. They've fallen behind a lot in games. Atlanta, we saw them fall behind against the Panthers. But he brings him back. He's got a lot of fire. He had the comeback overtime win against Tennessee. I think he has to take care of the football. He leads the league in picks. He's got to stop that. He's got to do a much better job in those situations. But he's got a lot of talent. He's a playmaker. Salah's got that defense playing a little bit better. Look, this isn't a good team by any means, but I think the Jets they're at least making steps in what I think is a good direction for the first time in a few years. Number 2, you go New England. It's kind of surprising to hear New England number 2 in a divisional ranking, but that's what they are, right? They're 2-3. They've had some close losses. I already talked about Miami. They lost a close game to Tampa. I think they're playing hard. Mac Jones has been what they've wanted and more. They had a comeback win against Houston, which, on the road, which is obviously good to win a road game in the NFL, but it's bad when you have to come back against a really bad Houston team. Look, this New England team is not as talented as other Patriots teams in the past. We seem to think that, Brady shifts and that's the real problem. I think this level of talent on offense and defense is a step lower than what it was just a few years ago. I think New England has a chance to, maybe get hot, sneak into the playoffs. I just don't think they're that good of a team. I got that at number 2. Number 1 is kind of clear cut. This is Buffalo. They're dominant. Josh Allen's playing great. They got Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox, Singletary at running back, solid offensive line, good special teams, defense, got a secondary with Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, good solid front 7. I mean, they just dominated Kansas City. They've had 4 straight blowout wins, killing teams, right? You just don't see that in the NFL. They had an embarrassing loss to Pittsburgh week 1, but honestly, they controlled that game. They outgained and out first down Pittsburgh by a heavy margin. They're 4-1, and really outside of this Monday night game coming up against Tennessee, they really only have 1 or 2 hard games left. I think the road to the Super Bowl in the AFC is going to go through Buffalo, and Buffalo is going to win this division going away. I think they're probably going to end up being the number 1 seed in the AFC. So just to recap my list, I got going top down. I got Buffalo at 1. I got New England at 2. I got a promising Jets team. Don't say that a lot, at 3. And I got a very disappointing Miami Dolphins team at 4. Who you got?
Very similar list. I'm not going to dwell too much on it because there's not much more to say. And I picked my list, and it was very funny because I picked the list, and then I looked at the standings, and they're identical. But I got the Jets in 4th just because I think they have the most room to grow, but I think they've performed the least out of them, and that's how I went about picking my teams. I just say let's give them another year. It's kind of hard when you're the first overall pick to, or not first overall pick, but if you're a top 5 pick, it's kind of hard to expect them to be good when they were one of the worst teams last year. At number 3, I have the Dolphins. Like you said, they've been so disappointing. They looked strong last year. They looked strong 2 years ago when they were supposed to be bad. But what is going on? I don't understand it. Hopefully they can turn some things around. Maybe Tua is the problem. Maybe him being hurt is the problem. We'll find out soon enough. Number 2, New England Patriots. Like we said, surprise, surprise, they're here at number 2. You always this used to be easy. They were number 1 all the time, but they are the ones that I would say have lost the most. Yet they've gained the most back through the draft. Mac Jones looks great. The team, I'm not too worried about them. I think they can fight their way eventually over the next year or two back into being a contender for number 1 in the division. But as of right now, it is far, far and away the Buffalo Bills. They're a great team, and I think one thing we're overlooking is the friendship between Knox and Allen that they have, and I think that's what that's built a strong bond on the field. So I have Bills, Pats, Dolphins, Jets. Very similar list, but I think, what else can you do once you get so far into the season? The records start to speak for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, for a division that traditionally has been pretty weak in New England at the top, it's actually following that same trend except for Buffalo, right? And I think this division, like all divisions, it comes down to the quarterbacks, and Miami's been bad, and the Jets and New England have rookies, right? So with that in mind, it's basically Buffalo's division running away. I don't see any other outcome except for that.
The next thing we have up is our weekly top 5 segment, one I was very excited for because it's a very interesting topic. I'll start us off, but our topic this week is the top 5 pair of brothers in the NFL in the past 5 years. So we cut it off. Obviously, the Mannings would be at like the top of this list, but we cut it off in the last 5 years, top 5 brothers in the NFL. Starting in number 5, I have Chris and Kyle Long. How I did this best was to think of players that I thought were good players, and then to differentiate them, I used accolades. That's the thing that I could think of the most. So the Longs, 2 Super Bowl wins, all by one brother though. A Walter Payton Man of the Year award between them. 3 Pro Bowls and 1 All-Pro. Not a bad resume, but obviously at the bottom of the list, there are brothers that are better than them. Moving up, number 4. The McCourtys, Devin and Jason McCourty. I think a lot of this has to do with the team they played for, but teams elevate talent sometimes. That's what good teams do. Between the McCourtys, they have 3 Super Bowls, 2 Pro Bowls, and 3 All-Pros. Most of the accolades are won with New England. Most of the accolades are won by Devin McCourty, but I would say Devin McCourty has been better than either of the Long brothers on their own. But they're very interesting because they're twins. So that's another aspect of this that is very interesting. In my number 3 spot, I have the Kelceys. They have 2 Super Bowls between them, 8 All-Pros, and 10 Pro Bowls. We're getting more dominant now, more and more accolades on the table. One thing that has been a theme through all of these, one brother far superior in the other brother. Travis Kelce is just an animal. Jason Kelce was good. He was good with Philly, but Travis Kelce is much better tight end than Jason Kelce was a lineman. He's possibly going to be one of the greatest tight ends of all time if he keeps it up. So that's where we're going. And now to the top 2. And this is where things start to balance out a hair. At number 2, I have the Pounceys. The Pounceys between the both of them, 13 Pro Bowls and 5 All-Pros. Neither of them, fortunately, were able to win a Super Bowl, but it's just a level of dominance by both of them. They're both so good on their own, And it's like you think of brothers, they went to college. I think they went to the same college together. They're drafted. I think one went to the draft before the other one, and then playing on their NFL teams in their own right. I know Mike was with Pittsburgh, and I think Marquise was with Miami, or at least he was there for a period of time. But they were just so good. You never really heard too many bad words about the Pounceys. They've been dominant for a very, very long time. Both of them out of the league now, but in the last 5 years, both Pounceys had played. A great pair of brothers. But the best pair of brothers, in my opinion, somewhat of an easy decision if you go off of the way that I measure success. You have the Watts. JJ and TJ. Sorry, Derek, you were excluded off of this list. You didn't really add much to it anyways, but 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, all won by JJ, and AFC Defensive Player of the Year, won by TJ. You have a Walter Payton Man of the Year award by JJ, and between all the two of them, 8 Pro Bowls, 8 All-Pros, and 3-time NFL sack leaders. Just complete dominance on the defensive line by a set of brothers who that level of play we have seen recently, and we don't know if they can sustain it, but that level of dominance by a pair of brothers is almost unheard of. And finally, my underdog, number 6 pick, are the Diggs. 1 All-Pro, 1 Pro Bowl, but an NFL reception leader last year, an NFL yards leader last year, and a current NFL interception leader. I think Trayvon and Stephon Diggs are a pair of brothers to watch out for the future.
Yeah, that's a good list. I like a lot of it. I gotta admit, I'm not a big Watt guy, which is weird. As prolific as they've been, I've always felt like TJ and JJ, while they've been obviously really good players, I almost feel like they've, in my opinion, right, that they've always been a little overhyped. JJ got to play with Jadeveon Clowney on the other side. Pittsburgh has a number of other pass rushers, so TJ has a lot of opportunities. So I think they're good players. I've always been, just me, my opinion, I've never been a big TJ or JJ Watt guy. But all right, I'll go through my list right now, and I'm starting at the top, number 5. I'm going to go Zach and Nick Martin, right? And this is more Zach than Nick. Zach Martin is a Hall of Fame guard, right? He's even played tackle last year. He's 6-time All-Pro. He's the best player on Dallas's team. He's been that way for a number of years. This guy's constantly ranked in the top 10, top 15, top 20 when the NFL does their 100 players list. He's an absolute stud. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. They run behind him all day. Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott's success is tied directly to Zach Martin. Nick Martin was a 2nd-round pick out of Notre Dame, started for Houston a while, plays with Vegas now, a good player, solid player, not a great player. This is more about Zach at number 5. Number 4, I'm going with the Bosa's, right? What they're able to do as pass rushers, I think, is unbelievable in terms of just raw talent and playmaking ability. While they may come second to the Watts in terms of sack production, I think in terms of playmaking, hits on the quarterback, drawing attention, I think they're absolutely unbelievable. Both were defensive rookies of the year. Joey has 47.5 sacks to his first 5 full season. Nick is an absolute animal when he's healthy. Both teams, LA and San Francisco, really demand that Nick and Joey respectively, play at a high level, and they need them to be successful. There's more stress on their shoulders, and they step up. If Nick's healthier, the Bosa's are higher on the list. I've got them at number 4. Number 3, I'm going to let my bias show a little bit here. I'm going to go Stephon and Trayvon Diggs. More just for Trayvon, just the statistical anomaly. 6 picks in 5 games, 7 picks in his last 7 games. It is an absolute just rarity in today's NFL, right? You're going back to the 1950s and 60s to get this level of interception production out of a defensive player, because with a mindset on turnovers and interceptions and especially the rules in today's NFL, it's much harder to get interceptions. Teams just won't throw your way. Diggs has done that this year. He started the trend last year. He's continued it this year. Stephon, I think, is an underrated receiver, right? And I know he's a Pro Bowler and All Pro, but I think what he did for Buffalo is absolutely outstanding, right? We look at Minnesota, right? Minnesota was winning playoff games and going to NFC Championship games with Stephon Diggs on that team. They leave, they're missing the playoffs, right? He is a team glue guy who is extremely productive. He blocks, he catches short routes, he's good on third down, deep plays, the whole situation. Stephon Diggs is a truly great player. I'm more impressed by him game by game, watching what he's doing in Buffalo. Number two, taking a little bit of a different twist here, right? I'm going Michael and Martellus Bennett. And here's why. I think Michael Bennett is one of the most underrated players in probably NFL history. This is a defensive lineman, right? Defensive tackle for Seattle for a number of years when they had their Legion of Boom defense. So Seattle, people forget, right? It was all about the corners and safeties and Sherman and Chancellor and Earl Thomas. But they played what's called the cover 3 defense, which means they had a 4 down defensive lineman, 3 linebackers, a deep safety, which was Thomas, a short safety, which would be Chancellor, and their 2 corners, right? One of which was Sherman. Because they didn't blitz very much, they needed to get pass rushing and run stopping out of their defensive linemen. Michael Bennett was that guy. He was the Warren Sapp of that team. He never really got the credit that I think he deserved because of the publicity that Thomas and Sherman got, but he was an absolutely dominating force, multiple Pro Bowls, should have gotten a lot more, an absolute superstar, played at a really, really high level for the time in the Legion of Boom, won a Super Bowl with Seattle, amazing player. And then Martellus Bennett, I think he kind of gets forgotten, right? He was a journeyman tight end. He had over 400 career catches, right? Very, very productive guy. And he won a Super Bowl, right? That's something either JJ, TJ, or frankly, Zach or Martin, Nick Martin, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, they can't say that, right? So both of these guys have won Super Bowls. Martellus Bennett had a huge role in the Patriots' comeback against Atlanta. I think that has a bigger role on my mind to thinking of what these guys were able to do in the biggest moments on great teams and in big situations. All right, number 1 for me, I'm going Travis and Jason Kelce. I'm a big Jason Kelce guy at center for Philadelphia. I don't like Philly, but I love what Jason Kelce is able to do. He's able to run block. He's able to pass block. He pulls. He gets out on screens. He's the leader. He does so much for that team. He went to 3 straight all-pro seasons. The fact that he hasn't gotten the more is only because Philly has stunk the last couple of years. He's maintained his high level of performance. He's a great player. And Travis Kelce, look, the guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's breaking tight end records, right? I think he owns the NFL record for receiving yards in a season. He is more important to that office than I think than even Tyreek Hill at this point, as Tyreek Hill is, there's ways you can maybe scheme Tyreek Hill out with a certain zone coverages. You can't scheme out Travis Kelce. He's been an absolute animal. He's done a great role in that offense. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's my number 1. Him and Jason is a number 1 brother combination in the NFL. My underrated, you mentioned them. I'm going Kyle and Chris Long, right? I think they did a lot of good things off the field, right? You mentioned the man of the year. They were pretty productive. None of them were really superstars, right? Kyle won 2 Super Bowls. Chris played a lot with the Chicago, and now he's Chris won 2 Super Bowls. Kyle played a lot with Chicago, and now he's with Kansas City. I think they're good players. I don't think they were great players. They were more situational role players who did their job, real kind of patriot kind of guys, and I think that got them a lot of publicity, but I don't think they're really that talent. I think they kind of overcame some of their talent deficiencies to have, successful careers in the NFL, and they got 2 rings to show for it. So to recap my list, I've got the Kelces, Travis and Jason at 1. I got Michael and Martellus Bennett at 2. I got Stephon and Trayvon Diggs at 3. I got the Bosas, Joey and Nick at 4. I've got the 2 offensive lineman brothers from Notre Dame, Zach and Nick Martin. And then I've got my underrated, I got Kyle and Chris Long.
And I had Watts, the Pounceys, the Kelces, the McCourtys, the Longs, and then my underrated, the Diggs.
So we had some overlap there, but it wasn't the same list. That's interesting, right? I kind of like when we have some differences there, kind of, highlight some different viewpoints and get to learn and think about things a little differently.
I know, yeah. I absolutely, I can see where you're coming from on a lot of your picks, so I can definitely understand that. I did, on my number 7 point on here, I was considering the Martins, and I think Zach Martin is far and away one of the best players on this list, but I think his brother's name's Nick. He just didn't have any accolades really to help out at all, period. And that was one thing that I put on my list. both brothers had to contribute for them to be uh, on the list, for me personally. So we don't really discuss what our criteria is, and I think that's great. I think we can both, we do it different ways, and it gives two different perspectives.
Yeah, I think we both had good lists. So, you ready to move on to our top games of the week and get a
Yes.
little deep thinking on these? How about you go first? No, I know you've got a little dog in the fight, so to speak, on one of them. So why don't you get us going?
All right. Well, I will give us the other team first, and I'll actually, obviously, okay, Ravens Chargers. I'm not going to speak too much on it because I have an extreme amount of bias about it, but at this point in time, I have to pick the Ravens to win because until they prove me wrong, I mean, like they've overcome anything lately, anything that has been thrown at them, all of the injuries, everything they've had. Lamar is just too good, and he gives you a chance in every single game. You just can't pick against him right now, so that's where I stand on that. For our other game of the week, I believe we had Arizona, and who was the second part? The Arizona,
Cleveland and Arizona.
Cleveland and Arizona. And that game, it seems like a better matchup than it is going to be, I believe. I believe right now, Arizona is playing a little bit of inflated football. They're obviously, I believe they're still the only unbeaten team left. I believe they've played a lot of good games. They've beaten a lot of teams, divisional teams. I chalk those up to probably going to end up balancing themselves out. Those games always come down most likely 50-50 matchups. They're going to win one. They're going to lose one. They got lucky. They've won the first ones. I think Kyler Murray's great. I think they have a ton of offensive firepower. I think they have some great coaching and play calling. And I think the defense has been pretty good so far. On the other side of the ball, I think while Arizona is an overachieving team, I think Cleveland is an underachieving team. I think they have a phenomenal defense. I think everyone on the offense outside of the quarterback are great players. They have a pretty good O-line. They have two great receivers. They have two great running backs. They have a good tight end. Baker Mayfield is not a bad quarterback. He's just not great. He's not at the level that you pay him $40-50 million a year for. I think he's more of a $20-25 million a year guy. And that leaves us in an interesting situation. Who do you pick? The team that I believe has been overperforming everything, or the team that I believe has been underperforming? And I think last week, against a very good Chargers team, one of the teams who I believe is one of the best teams in the NFL right now, the Browns almost got the job done. Almost. And I think Baker hears what people are saying about him. And I think the team hears what people are saying about them. I think they're saying, oh, Baker this, Baker that. Well, the team is good enough to win on their own. I think that the Browns can come into this game and win against a very good Arizona team who I think has been playing out of their minds. They're going to come back down to earth a little bit. I have the Cleveland Browns beating the Arizona Cardinals, making all right in the world, and we're coming back to an equilibrium of sorts.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot what you have to say there. I think the way this game goes, it comes down to the trenches, running the football and protecting the quarterback, right? So Arizona is a 28th ranked run defense. Cleveland obviously can run it very, very well. I think they're going to run it extremely well against Arizona. And running the ball will keep Kyler Murray off the field. It will keep him from getting into a rhythm. That'll kind of hurt their offense a little bit. I also think if there's an athletic team on defense that can contain Kyler Murray, it's probably Cleveland with guys like Miles Garrett, and the game wrecking potential he can have, especially if, some of their other guys get healthy. I think this is a game that I think quarterback play as much as I harp on it, I think this game isn't as much as about the quarterbacks. I think Kyler and Baker will both play okay. I think it's all about the offensive defensive line. And look, the Cardinals have just played grueling division games, right? They had a huge win over the LA Rams in LA. They just beat San Francisco, right? They're riding high. They have two big division wins. The NFL is tough. It's close. It's competitive. Cleveland's playing pretty good football. It's games in Cleveland. I like the offensive line and defensive line of Cleveland. I'm going the Browns here. I think that gives them a slight edge, being at home and having the better front on both sides of the football.
All right. And what do you think about Baltimore, LA?
So the Chargers, this is an interesting game, right? Because the Chargers and Baltimore are both 4-1. This is sort of a, who's the second best team in the AFC behind Buffalo right now? Look, Baltimore's banged up. They've had to battle through a number of injuries. LA is relatively healthy. I think that gives them a big edge, right? I think they've been able to get more continuity, and I think that matters against better teams, right? Against Detroit or Indianapolis, with the injuries, you can rely on a Jackson's talent or an Andrews, right, from Baltimore side, on talent alone to kind of overcome some deficiencies in rhythm and timing on the offensive side of the ball. The Chargers don't have those injuries, right? They have everybody grooved in. It's Eckler, it's Williams, it's Jared Cook, it's Keenan Allen, right? They've got a lot of continuity and time together, and they move the ball up and down the field against a pretty darn good Cleveland defense, right? I think their offensive coordinating has done very good. A lot of play actions, a lot of big plays. I think Baltimore's defense is, with the injuries, is starting to get exposed a little bit, right? I mean, Indianapolis moved the ball. Detroit was able to come back. I think this game is close and competitive. I'm really blown away by Lamar Jackson's growth, but I think the injuries on the Baltimore side and the continuity and confidence that the Chargers have, I think it gives them an advantage. And I'm very, very curious to see what Derwin James does in this game. What he's able to do either on the box against Lamar Jackson or covering Mark Andrews, the Baltimore tight end. I think Derwin James is going to be the secret X factor in this one. I think he's going to make some big plays. I'm thinking the Chargers are going to win.
And he was Lamar's first year in the playoffs. They used Derwin James to cover Lamar, and they weren't able to get that win. They actually beat them in season. In the playoffs, they were able to beat them, come back. Lamar meets them in the playoffs again. They do beat the Chargers. So that is, I think, the key points to look at in this game. Is Rashad Bateman going to be healthy? Will he finally play? That gives them another X factor in the passing game. Will Deshaun Elliott come back in at safety? A very big unknown playmaker for Baltimore. If you're from Baltimore, you've heard a lot about him. They call him the Joker for the reason. He's a big playmaker from Texas. Great football player. We need him back because Averett alone was good enough to lock down Tyreek Hill on the Kansas City Chiefs. But Averett with Stevens at safety, that's two backup guys right over each other in the secondary. I think, as we saw, the Colts were able to expose that multiple times, and you can't have both of those guys out. So if Elliott comes back in, I think they have a shot. If Bateman comes back in, I think that gives them a little bit more firepower on offense. I'm obviously going to pick Baltimore to win this game, but those are the things that if I truly want to give them a shot to win, those things have to happen.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the big thing, right, you're talking about those guys coming back in, is Jackson has played out of his mind. So it's hard to pick against him. But you wonder, as they overcome the injuries, like at what point does it become too much?
Right? Yeah, I mean, you're putting so much on his shoulders, Yeah. There's only so far that it can go.
Right. So who do you got for your underdog pick or game to watch this week?
Well, I don't know what you pick. I think I have a feeling I know what you picked. But for me, because of this weekend, my underdog matchup of the week, and more importantly than the football, I have to pick the Cowboys and the Patriots. Hopefully, in my book, I hope it ends in a tie, so everyone is happy this weekend. We know your lovely fiance Alyssa is a supporter of the Patriots, as long as her family. We know on your side of the family you have a big Dallas following. I just don't want any blows to come out at the wedding if someone says a sly comment. Let's hope for a tie. If I have to pick, I think it's Dallas, and I don't think it's by a little bit. I'm sorry, Kyle, Alyssa's family, the Codys. If you watch the games, Dallas is looking pretty on fire right now, and they're not winning by a little bit anymore. They are finding ways to win by a couple of scores, and that's who I have for my underdog matchup of the week.
Yeah, I like it. It's going to be wild, right? We didn't plan it months out in advance. We did not. Obviously, the schedule wasn't released. The wedding begins at 4:20 or 4:15. I think kickoff's at 4:25. So I've already made a deal with the officiant to make it a 30-second ceremony. No, I'm kidding, of course.
I'll have my earpiece in, and I will feed you updates as the ceremony goes on. We'll think of some code words.
Yeah, we'll definitely think of some code words. It's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be an interesting experience. Well, my underdog pick of the week. Look, this is kind of a stretch. I'm gonna admit it. I know I'm aggressive with these. Look, Buffalo has been killing people. They're riding really high. They just slayed the dragon, so to speak, in Kansas City, right? And I kind of harken back to when Baltimore beat Kansas City. They went to Detroit the next week and they had a battle with Detroit, right? Took a 66-yard field goal to win. And for the emotional domination of Kansas City, I think Buffalo it's just a wear down, right? It's just an emotional low. They blew them out after a big rain delay on the road. They got to go on the road again to Tennessee. Look, I mean, Tennessee's been a little bit of a disappointment. A.J. Brown got a little healthy. Julio Jones should be back. Derrick Henry's doing Derrick Henry things. This kind of feels a little bit like of a letdown game for Buffalo just because of their the emotional, release of destroying Kansas City, a team that's dominated them the same way Baltimore beating Kansas City led to a little bit of a hangover for them against Detroit. I kind of see that same kind of thing going on. The game's in Tennessee. Kansas City's defense is so bad that Tennessee will be able to score points. I think it's a close game. I think maybe Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans upset Buffalo at home here. I'm thinking Tennessee over Buffalo is my underdog pick of the week.
Okay. See that. It's definitely interesting choice. I think I would have to take the Bills in that game still. I do think it'll be a bit of a letdown, but I think defense travels. I think Buffalo has a pretty strong defense. I think what they may lack in offensive capabilities because of a letdown, hangover game, whatever you want to call it, I think they make up. It might be a lot closer than people think, but I think the Bills still pull it out. Am I safe to put you down for the Cowboys this weekend?
Yeah, I'll pick Dallas over New England. And just another comment on the Bills-Titans game. Kansas City moved the ball on Buffalo. I think Pittsburgh scored some on Buffalo. Miami's a dumpster fire, so I'm not counting them too much. I think it's a good Buffalo defense, but I think they rely so much on turnovers and making big plays. I think if, Tannehill and the Titans are a lot better at home, usually with turnovers. So I think I can kind of see that kind of playing out a little bit here.
I think if they can suffocate them with a strong dose of Derrick Henry, that will go a long way into softening that defense up. If they can get off to a good running start, I think that'll give them a lot of success during the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. But we'll have to see. I mean, I think it's an interesting matchup, Monday Night Football.
I will say, as we move into our final segment, we're going to steamroll through this. We've had a bit of a long show, but we had a lot to talk about. I don't regret any of it. I think all of it was good to talk about. Our gut check segment. Last week we did good. We were both surprisingly 12-4. Our differences ended up balancing out perfectly, leaving me at 21-11 on the year, you at 22-10. But 12-4 is pretty good. We're over 75% on our picks, so I think we're looking strong. Let's see if we can continue. I have us both with Cleveland. You have the Chargers. I have Baltimore. We both have the Cowboys. You have the Titans. I have the Bills. We will start from there.
Let's go.
Buccaneers, Eagles.
Yeah, this is Tampa, right? Thursday Night Football. I think Philly had a big game, but Tampa's too much.
Definitely got to go with the Bucs. Dolphins, Jags.
Both teams are collapsing. I just trust Miami more than I trust Jacksonville right now. But this is Jacksonville's best chance at a win, but I still think they lose. I'm going Miami.
Yeah, there's no way I'm picking Jacksonville until they prove otherwise. I agree with you there. Panthers, Vikings.
Panthers are on a free fall. I think this is a statement game for them. They need to win this. I think Carolina has to win it.
After what I saw last week, I'm not so sure. And I think it's going to be a lot closer game than people think. I think Carolina's defense, what pulls them through. I would agree with you that also they just acquired Stephon Gilmore, I believe, so maybe a second week in the program is going to elevate them. I'll agree with you on the Panthers here. LA Giants. Rams. LA Rams, Giants.
Oh, Rams. The Giants are devastated with injuries. I wouldn't pick the Giants. Rams.
Yeah, there's really no even point asking that question. Giants literally have lost everybody. Mike Glennon's not going to win you any games. So we move on. Texans, Colts.
I feel bad for saying this. I think Indianapolis is just emotionally devastated after that loss. Texans played better against New England. I'm going Houston, being aggressive.
I absolutely agree with you. Even though I don't think David Mills is necessarily great, I think the Colts lost a lot of guys that we're not talking about. We didn't really mention. They had a few key injuries that really hurt them. One in the secondary. They're missing some guys on the O-line. I think the Texans, in a tough divisional game, are just good enough to get the win. I think it corrects itself later down the road, but I believe it's in Indianapolis. I just think they, like you said, there's too much that got taken out of them last week. Texans win this one. We got Chiefs, Washington.
I think you go Kansas City here, right? I mean, this is sort of a last stand. They've lost 3 games. They need to turn it around. Mahomes over Heineke.
Yeah, big KC bounce back game here. Like we said, there's too much talent on the team. They're not going to lose games forever. I think this is a huge bounce back game, and not just by a little. Heineke's Bud Light deal has worn off a long time ago. Obviously, they weren't able to pull it out last week. I don't think it travels much further than that. So, KC by a lot. Packers, Bears.
This is Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers has been on a tear.
Yeah, I see that the Bears have won 2 in a row now with Fields. I think they're looking hot. But Green Bay looks really strong. Rodgers looks really strong. And Rodgers, like Jackson, it seems ever since a tough week 1 loss, anything that you were able to throw at them, he's been able to overcome. So until he proves me wrong, got to stay with Green Bay. Bengals, Lions.
This is a Cincinnati bounce back game.
I'm going to disagree with you here. I think there's a lot of emotions in that Lions locker room. I think they've had so many tight games. I know Cincinnati looks okay, but I think the Lions are too good of a team and too good coach to lose everything. There's no way they go 0-6. I could be completely wrong here, but I'm going to take the Lions. We got Cardinals, Browns. We already picked that one. Cowboys, Pats, picked that. Raiders, Broncos.
Both teams are in a free fall, but the distractions with the Raiders, I'm going Broncos. They're more stable.
I have to agree with you. After the media circus, maybe they come out, play a strong game for their new coach, but I think there's too much going on, and I haven't been impressed with the Raiders as of late. I'm going to go Broncos. Seahawks, Steelers.
You got to go Pittsburgh. Geno Smith is starting for Seattle.
As much as I hate it, I agree with you. Seahawks might be okay, but Geno Smith is not. There's no way they pull it out. This Pittsburgh team isn't that bad. They might be the worst team in the AFC North right now, but they're not that bad. There's no way they lose to Geno Smith. And finally, the last game was the Bills and the Titans, and we have covered it. We have now hit all the games for this week. It looks like there's some hot matchups in here, some games to watch. So I think we have a good week of football ahead of us. I don't know how much more controversial stuff can come out, but, if they're leaking emails, you never know who's the next coach to fall. So,
if controversial stuff's happening, we're going to be here to talk about it. So
absolutely. Obviously, good luck. You're getting married tomorrow. Congratulations. We will be back next week, so don't look too far for us. We will be back. And we have been discussing, we may start coming at you twice a week, so be prepared for that. As always, you can find us on all of our socials. Look for Saturday Morning Inspection on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can look for us on Twitter at SMI Football Show. And as always, look for us at our website, smishow.com. Nick, one of our best shows I think we've done so far. Hopefully the growth keeps going upwards. I am nothing but excited for the rest of this football season.
let's get after it. Thanks to all the listeners. We'll see you next time.
To the listeners, we'll see you next time.